All right, you guys, what's cracking? Buenos dias. So I'm gonna do something a little different, okay? I'm gonna do a little different. I watched Damian Porter's video, and he spoke on people that gave him reparations and all these groups that he mentioned, which I know for a fact are not true, but let's just agree to not disagree. To disagree, let's agree to disagree, okay? So I got a list of people that get reparations from the United States. Japanese Americans, they were giving $20,000 tax free payouts to each of the roughly 82,000 surviving Japanese Americans who were forcibly interned during the World War II. So these are Japanese Americans that were thrown into concentration camps during World War II. So they were giving compensation for that, 20,000, and it was roughly 82,000 Japanese Americans. And then there was Native American tribes. The government has paid billions of dollars to various, keyword, various tribes through the Indian Claims Commission in 1946. Now, when they say various, not all Indian tribes were giving reparations. There were specific reasons why certain native tribes were giving reparations. That's because they had creeks, lakes, and other natural resources in which United States still wanted to partake in, so they were given reparations, okay? And that was in 1946. And they paid billions of dollars. But it was not all American Indians. Then radiation victims. There was a radiation victims, apparently the Radiation Exposure Compensation Act in 1990. So people that downwinders from Ukrainian miners. Uranium miners. Uranium, not Ukrainian. Uranium miners. In the atmosphere, nuclear testing was involved, and it was government testing, weapons testing that caused this. So some people were compensated for this, and it's called a radiation view victims. And then there were Iranian hostages, and I remember this very well because I was a kid when it happened. But it was $4.4 million were per hostage, $10 per day of captivity. And this was in 1979. This is when Iran and the United States first got into it, and there was a group of Iranians that were held hostage. Or there were Americans were held hostage by the Iranians. 9/11 victims' families. This government created a September 11th victim compensation fund for people that were affected by the 9/11 towers, trade towers. Okay. District of Columbia slave owners in 1962. District of Columbia, and I'm going to read this all the way through so there's no misunderstanding. 1962, the District of Columbia Emancipated Act paid up to $300 per enslaved person directly to loyal Union slaveholders as compensation for the loss of their property when slavery was abolished in Washington, D.C. Now, some slave owners were giving compensation, $300 per slave, because when the law was abolished, they lost what they perceived as their property. And I was a little shocked at this one, but Damian Porter had pointed this one out, and he was correct about that. But those are the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 six organizations or people per se were compensated through reparation. There was no Jews being compensated. There was no Indians being compensated. There were certain tribes. Not all Indians, and not all because they were native. It's because there was still natural resources on those tribal lands. Okay. Now, the next question I was posing was the difference between Native Americans and Black Americans, and what was the problem with reparations, and why some Native Americans, or I personally feel, that if somebody were to be giving reparations, and before I go all the way with that, you need to understand, I do not agree that anybody should be getting reparations because it would hurt the economy, it would hurt everybody involved. Not just me, not just my family, but everybody that pays taxes. So, with that being said, let's get if they were if they were just giving out compensation and I felt who would get it, I would feel personally would feel natives belong or Indians belong getting reparations before any other group. My personal feelings doesn't make it true. Doesn't necessarily make it true. So the first thing you have to understand is it's hard to say one group was hurt more because the government treated Native Americans and Black Americans in two completely different, terrible ways. Instead of competition, historians look at it two different types of terms. Okay, Native Americans should be getting compensation because they have loss of life, massive loss of life, where they try to exterminate American Indians. And then the fact that this continent was filled with nothing but natives, so they lost their land to top off their being eradicated by the United States. And then the fact that they lost their culture because they lost their lands and their lives and their elders. So they lost land, life, and culture. Black Americans didn't have it much easier. The goal was to take their labor. The biggest impact of Black Americans was exploitations being used. Stolen freedom, which means made them slaves. Treated as property. They were not treated as human beings. They were treated as property, no better than a car, no better than a home, no better than a bottle of water. They were considered as property, which is wrong. And they considered stolen wealth because they were never paid. They could not pass any money down to their kids, which created a massive wealth gap that still exists today. So they have some gripe in this. We're not treated any better, and from my reading, I understand. One was about life and property versus stealing the freedom and future wealth for your family, right? And from reading from this, I understand it was two different types of harm, neither of which was good, but it shouldn't be a competition. So I will admit to that, right? Native Americans were affected because the country wanted them gone. That's it. They wanted Native Americans gone. They wanted Indians gone. Blacks were affected because the country wanted them trapped so they could use their free labor. It's two different things, right? Me personally, I told you, I feel natives had it coming more than any other group. Why Native Americans have strongest case? And I personally went through a bunch of this stuff myself and gave myself notes. Say, if anyone deserves to fix it, it is American natives of the law. The U.S. government signed officials' written promises, treaties, and them to respect their land, and then broke those promises. So essentially, it was a broken contract, a business contract. That's one of the reasons I believe that it should be reparations, right? But I'm going to go back even farther. I don't agree that any group should get reparations. And this is the part that's getting left out when they talk about uh, reparations when I first got confronted about this, right? This is the part everybody leaves or edits out of the conversation. Now, I don't think it's right that any group, including Native Americans, Indians, get paid out nowadays because it would crush the country. Economically, we could not handle it, and it would essentially ruin this country, and this country will be done. So, what's the purpose of having all this money if you don't have a country? Because the money that they give you would essentially be worthless. Because the country is no longer standing, that means the funds are no longer there. So they can give you all the money in the world. It would mean nothing because your country has folded, so the money is no good. Now, it would cause heavy taxes, big arguments over who qualifies. Then you have to figure out who's going to qualify, how much percentage of Indians you got to have in your blood to receive funds, right? And do your kids get it after that? There's just so many different factors that you can't possibly fathom unless you're really getting into this on what these qualities would take, what it would take to do this. Okay. Now, I'm from the middle ground. I believe returning land, not cash. And the middle ground is returning, I'm sorry, that might be really wrong. Returning the land and not cash is something that's you could look into. Me personally believe that they even need to be cautious with this. Because the extract problems you are worried about, many Native American leaders actually do not want cash checks. A lot of Native Americans or tribe leaders don't want cash. They don't want funds. They want their land back. We all know that's not going to happen. Public land, giving control of empty federal land or other national parks back to the tribe. So what they're suggesting is they give land that's not being used back to an Indian tribes and let them do with what they're going to do. They don't want to take people's private properties. If you bought a home or say, I own a home, right? Just because that's on Indian land doesn't mean that the Indian tribes and the leaders today want to go in and take your home. No, they want federal land that nobody's using. That's just wasting away as far as they're concerned. And they want to do something with it. So that's what their compromise is. And they want it to be able to run it the way they want to run it without any interference from the United States federal government. That, in the eyes of the American Indians, that would fix all their broken promises, their broken treaties. It would help with the economic, because believe it or not, United States American Indians understand that this is their country now. They don't like it, but this is their country, and they don't want it just to fold. They don't want that. They want to have a little bit more of their land back, and let them do what they please, what they want to do with it. But at the same time, they don't want to crush the United States because they understand that it's harmful for everybody around. Now, my thinking is based on economic worries. That's it. Economically, I feel paying reparations to anybody is going to hurt the whole country as a whole. Not just Rasa, not just Indians, not just blacks, not just whites. It's going to hurt the economy. It's going to hurt everybody. And I think that's where I uh I don't agree with reparations. It's going to hurt a national. It's putting more burden on it, and as it is, we have a high national debt as it is, raising prices for everything again across the board. More gas prices for gas, food, and anything else you can think of. That would be inflation brought on by trying to give reparations out to these people. Now, nobody said that this stuff is not wrong. What has happened? I never said that. Never said they don't got to come in, because they do. All the shit that's gone on between the Native Americans and the blacks, which are two different groups, should have never happened, and there should be repercussions for it. But it's been so long, I think the only one to judge them should be our maker. See, if you want to focus on everything, right, as far as Indians and why I believe that they should have had reparations if it was feasible, which it's not. It's based on the broken treaties, the physical documents and writing and contracts throughout history to prove that United States broke their promises and just basically fucking tried to wipe out Native Americans without any kind of fucking scruples, right? And it's politically can be proven. Legally, it can be proven. Okay, but like I said, this happened so long ago, it's used to try to do it now. In my eyes, ancestors from North America were definitely the first people to live in the United States, which means Native American Indians. And I don't really want to get into this part, but I have to, because this is where all this is stemming from. The theory that federal black Americans, FBA, are the original indigenous people of the land contradicts all historical and scientific facts. This claim hurts Native American communities because it tries to erase actual history and rights. See, FBA is not, they see what they want to see. I can't say that all of them are claiming to be natives out of pure spite. I can't say that about a few. One, we all know, the one that always brings me up. We know that's spite. That's not actual facts, and it's not how he looks at it. His sole reasoning for doing what he does is money. That's it. I'm not saying Damian Porter, but I'm talking about the FBA gentleman. Okay. So, of course, Native Americans are going to be offended that somebody's trying to take their culture, trying to erase them from history. So it's going to be offensive. So if you got Native blood in you, of course, it's going to hurt you. It's going to piss you off. It's going to do everything, because this is something that's ours. And nobody else can have it. Nobody else has the right to have it. It's ours. It belongs to us. There's DNA evidence. There's historical records. There's documents. There's so much to prove the fact that American Indians and blacks community are not the same, and that blacks came through the transatlantic slave trade. They were not living here. Okay, and it says, and this is something else, why the FBA claim hurts Native American. It erases their history, erases our history. Native Americans survived centuries of forced removals and broken treaties. Saying they were not here first minimizes the real history. it steals their identity. Calling another group Indigenous American takes away the unique legal and political rights that belong to Native Americans, Native tribes. It mixes up two meanings. Foundational Black Americas has a deep centuries old history built on America. However, building a culture here after arriving is very different from being the original people who were native to the land itself. Okay, now, like I said, there is archaeological evidence, historical, written, DNA. There is so many different evidence to prove Native Americans and foundational blacks or blacks were not the same. There's so much evidence to prove that foundational black America, the black community was brought through transatlantic slave. Now, I'm not going to sit there and argue with these gentlemen over this fact. They can go argue with an expert that deals with this because I am no expert. But there are many experts out there that are actually willing and more than able to contradict everything you talk about when it comes to that fact that you say FBA. Now, whether FBA built United States through their free labor and made United States wealthy is not my discussion. It's not my gripe. I'm not disputing that. I am disputing the fact that my people, indigenous Indians of America, lost their lives and lost their land and were brutally trying to be eradicated more than any other group. Do I feel that they belong, if they deserve reparations for what they went through? No, I don't. Not because I don't feel for my people, but because it would hurt our economy as of today. I'm not worried about what happened thousands of years ago or 100 years ago. I'm worried about what's happening today because I have to feed my family today. Now, people can go on here all day long and say I'm a racist. Sonny's a racist. Sonny's a racist. I gave you some points right now on how I feel about things. I don't have a problem with Damian Porter. I don't have a problem with anybody else. The guy from FBA, I particularly don't care for the gentleman because I feel that he actually knows the difference and that he is purposely antagonizing and being disrespectful to my raza, to my people. It is very well documented that raza, Native American Indians are all the same. We're all indigenous to this country, to the Americas. Not just this country, but this whole continent. That we were one. Now, there's a theory that we came from Siberia area, China, and all that through the Bering Strait, which is a strip of land that apparently came through during the winter between China and the United States, right? Well, Canada, technically Canada. And it would come over this small piece of land during a specific time in order to make it through it. If they didn't get through it in time, they would pass either from the winter storms or it would melt. And then there's no more land. That is a theory. Apparently, there is some kind of DNA that supports this theory. But again, it's just a theory. And then supposedly from there, from the Bering Strait, indigenous people migrated all the way down into all the Americas. I believe specific parts about this doesn't mean I believe in everything. Okay. Bering Strait, I've heard different stories saying that the Bering Strait would have never lasted that long. So I got my little, well, I don't know kind of thing going on, right? But just to say, that was 20,000 years ago. And like I said, now I have to worry about feeding my family, teaching my grandkids and kids a little history about where we came from. And I feel offended when you got somebody from a different race, a different culture that has a whole different experience when it comes to from the history of their people. Their experience shows transatlantic slavery, being sold by their own gente to the Spaniards, brought over here to the Americas and sold and traded. What a lot of people don't talk about is there is evidence to prove that the Spaniards, a lot were blacks themselves. And when they came over to the United States or the Americas, they try to erase, again, they try to conquer and erase natives' religion, language, and history, and everything else that goes with it. So, again, this is my ploy. This is what I feel. This is how I speak. I'm not talking about, this is not, to me, this is not something that is racist. I don't believe it's racist. I don't think it's I don't think my views are considered racist. I feel that it's based on economics. I feel like that's hold on. I wrote it down to a better way of saying it. I just feel that it's not based on race. It's based on facts and uh, broken contracts and peace treaties and money. And I don't believe it's based on race. Only reason spoke on FBA is because this is stemming from FBA. This is stemming from them. This is stemming, trying to eradicate my raza, just like the Spaniards did, just like the American people, the whites when they first came to the United States, they try to eradicate my people, and it hasn't stopped since. A lot of people forget that there was multiple trees with people being hung and persecuted, and there was a Mexican tree, and then there was a black tree, and an Indian tree. So this, I hope it clarifies everything from my point of view. Do I want to be in this argument? No, I don't. Do I want to argue with Damian Porter or the FBA guy? No, I don't. I don't have nothing against Damian Porter. I believe that he has a different opinion about me, about the situation, and that's fine. And nothing. He can go argue with experts. It's not in one way or another. I'm not gonna have a say so on whether they get reparations or not. So with that being said, have a blessed one, you guys. Good night, and I'll talk to you soon. Bye bye.